Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Citizen of the Galaxy by Robert Heinlein. Our hero, Thorby, has finally found out where he comes from. His real name is Thor Bradford Rudbeck, and he is a child of a very wealthy family back on Earth. And he is being taken home in a very opulent air car in the company of his beautiful cousin, Leda. And he has just told her that he used to be a beggar and that he learned begging from Pop, whom we know as Colonel Baslam. Daddy had left them so that she could get to work. Asking a man about himself never failed. How does one get started, Thor? I wouldn't know where to begin. I was taught. You see, I was up for sale, and he thought of trying to explain Pop and decided to let it wait. An old beggar bought me. Bought you? I was a slave. Leda felt as if she had stepped off into water over her head. Had he said cannibal, vampire, or warlock, she would have been no more shocked. She came up, mentally gasping. Thor, if I've been rude, I'm sorry, but we all are curious about the time, goodness, it's been over 15 years, that you've been missing. But if you don't want to answer, just say so. You were a nice little boy, and I was fond of you. Please don't slap me down if I ask the wrong question. You don't believe me? How could I? There haven't been slaves for centuries. Thorby wished that he had never had to leave the Hydra and gave up. He had learned in the Guard that the slave trade was something many Fraki in the inner worlds simply hadn't heard of. You knew me when I was little? Oh, yes. Why can't I remember you? I can't remember anything back before I was I can't remember, Tara. She smiled. I'm 3 years older than you. When I saw you last, I was 6, so I remember. And you were 3, so you've forgotten. Oh. Thorby decided that here was a chance to find out his own age. How old are you now? She smiled wryly. Now I'm the same age you are, and I'll stay that age until I'm married. Turn about, Thorby. When you ask the wrong question, I shan't be offended. You don't ask a lady her age on Terra. You assume she is younger than she is. So? Thorby pondered this curious custom. Among the people, a female claimed the highest age she could, for status. So, for example, your mother was a lovely lady, but I never knew her age. Perhaps she was 25 when I knew her, perhaps 40. You knew my parents? Oh, yes. Uncle Creighton was a darling with a boomy voice. He used to give me handfuls of dollars to buy candy sticks and balloons with my own sweaty little hand. She frowned. But I can't remember his face. Isn't that silly? Never mind, Thor. Tell me anything you want to. I'd be happy to hear anything you don't mind telling. I don't mind, Thorby answered, but while I must have been captured, I don't remember it. As far as I remember, I never had parents. I was a slave several places and masters until I reached Jubalpur. Then I was sold again, and it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Leda lost her company's smile. She said in a still voice, You really mean it? Or do you? Thorby suffered the ancient annoyance of the returned traveler. If you think that slavery has been abolished, well, it's a big galaxy. Shall I roll up my trouser leg and show you? Show me what, Thor? My slave's mark, the tattoo a factory used to identify merchandise. He rolled up his left trouser. See? The date is my manumission. It's Sarganese, a sort of Sanskrit. I don't suppose you can read it. She stared round-eyed. How horrible! How perfectly horrible! He covered it. Depends on your master, but it's not good. But why doesn't somebody do something? He shrugged. It's a long way off. But she stopped as her father came out. Hi, kids. Enjoying the hop, Thor? Yes, sir. The scenery's wonderful. The Rockies aren't a patch on the Himalayas, but our Tetons are pretty wonderful, and there they are. We'll be home soon, he pointed. See, there's Rudbeck. That city is named Rudbeck? It used to be Johnson's Hole or some such when it was a village, but I wasn't speaking of Rudbeck City. I meant our home, your home, Rudbeck. You can see the tower above the lake, with the Grand Tetons behind it. Most magnificent setting in the world. Your Rudbeck of Rudbeck, at Rudbeck. Rudbeck cubed, your father called it, but he married into the name and wasn't impressed by it. I like it. It has rolling thunder. It's good to have a Rudbeck back in residence. Thorby wallowed in his bath, from needle shower through hot pool whose sides and bottom massaged him with 1,000 fingers, to lukewarm swimming plunge that turned cooler while he was in it. He was cautious in the last, having never learned to swim, and he had never had a valet. He had noticed that Rudbeck had dozens of people in it, not many for its enormous size, but he began to realize that most of them were servants. This impressed him not as much as it might have. He knew how many, many slaves staffed any rich household on Jubal. He did not know that a living servant on Terra was the peak of ostentatious waste, greater than sedan chairs on Jubal, much greater than the lavish hospitality at the gatherings. He simply knew that valets made him nervous, and now he had a squad of 3. Thorby refused to let anyone bathe him. He gave in to being shaved because the available razor was a classic straight edge, and his own would not work on Rudbeck's power supply. Otherwise, he merely accepted advice about unfamiliar clothing. The clothing waiting for him in wardrobe loads did not fit perfectly. The chief valet snipped and rewelded, muttering apologies. He had Thorby attired, ruffled jabot to tights, when a footman appeared. Mr. Weemsby sends greetings to Rudbeck and asks that he come to the Great Hall. Thorby memorized the route he followed. Uncle Jack, in midnight and scarlet, was waiting with Lida, who was wearing... Thorby was at a loss. Colors kept changing, and some of it was hardly there. But she looked well. Her hair was now iridescent. He spotted among her jewels a bauble from Finster and wondered if it had shipped in Sisu. Why, it was possible he had listed it himself. Uncle Jack said jovially, "There you are, lad. Refreshed? We won't wear you out, just a family dinner." The dinner included 12 people and started with a reception in the Great Hall, drinks, appetizers passed by soft-footed servants, music, while others were presented. Rudbeck of Rudbeck, Lady Wilkes, your Aunt Jennifer, lad, come from New Zealand to welcome you. Rudbeck of Rudbeck, Judge Bruder and Mrs. Bruder. Judge is chief counsel, and so on. Thorby memorized names, linked them with faces, thinking that it was like the family, except that relationship titles were not precise definitions. He had trouble estimating status. He did not know which of 80-odd relation cousins meant with respect to Lida, though he supposed she must be a first cross-cousin, since Uncle Jack had a surname not Rudbeck, so he thought of her as taboo, which would have dismayed her. He did realize that he must be in the sept of a wealthy family, but what his status was nobody mentioned, nor could he figure out status of others. 2 of the youngest women dropped him curtsies. He thought at first that one had stumbled and tried to help her, but when the second did it, he answered by pressing his palms together. The older women seemed to expect him to treat them with respect. Judge Bruder he could not classify. He hadn't been introduced as a relative, yet this was a family dinner. He fixed Thorby with an appraising eye and barked, "Glad to have you back, young man. There should be a Rudbeck at Rudbeck. Your holiday has caused trouble, hasn't it, John?" "More than a bit," agreed Uncle Jack, "but we'll get it straightened out. No hurry. Give the lad a chance to find himself. Surely, surely, thumb in the dike." Thorby wondered what a dike was, but Lida came up and placed her hand on his elbow. She steered him to the banquet hall. Others followed. Thorby sat at one end of a long table with Uncle Jack at the other. Aunt Jennifer was on Thorby's right and Lida on his left. Aunt Jennifer was asking questions and supplying answers. He admitted that he had just left the guard. She had trouble understanding he had not been an officer. He let it ride and mentioned nothing about Jubalpur. Lita had made him wary of the subject. It did not matter. He asked a question about New Zealand and received a guidebook lecture. Then Lita turned from Judge Bruder and spoke to Thorby. Aunt Jennifer turned to the man on her right. The tableware was in part strange, especially chop tongs and skewers, but spoons were spoons and forks were forks. By keeping his eye on Lita, he got by. Food was served formally, but he had seen grandmother so served. Table manners were not great trouble to a man coached by Fritz's sharp-tongued kindness. Not until the end was he stumped. The butler-in-chief presented him with an enormous goblet, splashed wetness in it, and waited. Lita said softly, "Taste it, nod, and put it down." He did so. As the butler moved away, she whispered, "Don't drink it. It's bottled lightning. By the way, I told Daddy no toasts." At last the meal was over. Lita again cued him, "Stand up." He did, and everyone followed. The family dinner was just a beginning. Uncle Jack was in evidence only at dinners, and not always then. He excused his absences with, "Someone has to keep the fires burning. Business won't wait." As a trader, Thorby understood that business was business, but he looked forward to a long talk with Uncle Jack instead of so much social life. Lita was helpful, but not informative. "Daddy is awfully busy, different companies and things. It's too complicated for me. Let's hurry, the others are waiting." Others were always waiting. Dancing, skiing. Thorby loved the flying sensation, but considered it a chancy way to travel, particularly when he fetched up in a snowbank, having barely missed a tree. Card parties, dinners with young people at which he took one end of the table and Lita the other, more dancing, hops to Yellowstone to feed the bears, midnight suppers, garden parties. Although Rudbeck Estate lay in the lap of the Tetons with snow around it, the house had an enormous tropical garden under a dome so pellucid that Thorby did not realize it was there until Lita had him touch it. Lita's friends were fun, and Thorby gradually became sophisticated in small talk. Young men called him Thor instead of Rudbeck, and Lita Slugger. They treated him with familiar respect and showed interest in the fact that he had been in the Guard and had visited many worlds, but they did not press personal questions. Thorby volunteered little, having learned his lesson. But he began to tire of fun. A gathering was wonderful, but a working man expects to work. The matter came to a head. A dozen of them were skiing, and Thorby was alone on the practice slope. A man glided down and snowplowed to a stop. People hopped in and out of the States field day and night. This newcomer was Joel Delacroix. "Hi, Thor." "Hi, Joe." "I've been wanting to speak to you. I have an idea I'd like to discuss after you take over. Can I arrange to see you without being baffled by 4011 secretaries?" "When I take over?" "Or later, at your convenience. I want to talk to the boss. After all, you're the heir. I don't want to discuss it with Weemsby, even if he'd see me." Joe looked anxious. "All I want is 10 minutes. Say 5 if I don't interest you at once. Rudbeck's promise, eh?" Thorby tried to translate. "Take over? Heir?" He answered carefully, "I don't want to make any promises now, Joel." Delacroix shrugged. "Okay, but think about it. I can prove it's a moneymaker." "I'll think about it," Thorby agreed. He started looking for Lita. He got her alone and told her what Joe had said. She frowned slightly. "It probably wouldn't hurt, since you aren't promising anything. Joel is a brilliant engineer, but better ask Daddy." "That's not what I meant. What did he mean, take over?" "Why, you will eventually." "Take over what?" "Everything. After all, you're Rudbeck of Rudbeck." "What do you mean by everything?" Why, she swept an arm at mountain and lake, at Rudbeck City beyond. "All of it, Rudbeck, lots of things. Things personally yours, like your sheep station in Australia and the house in Majorca. And business things, Rudbeck Associates is many things, here and other planets. I couldn't begin to describe them. But they're yours, or maybe ours, for the whole family is in it. But you are the Rudbeck of Rudbeck, as Joe said, the heir. Thorby looked at her while his lips grew dry. He licked them and said, "Why wasn't I told?" She looked distressed. "Thor, dear, we've let you take your time. Daddy didn't want to worry you." "Well," he said, "I'm worried now. I'd better talk to Uncle Jack." John Weemsby was at dinner, but so were many guests. As they were leaving, Weemsby motioned Thorby aside. "Lita tells me you're fretting." "Not exactly. I want to know some things." "You shall. I was hoping that you would tire of your vacation. Let's go to my study." They went there. Weemsby dismissed his second shift secretary and said, "Now, what do you want to know?" "I want to know," Thorby said slowly, "what it means to be Rudbeck of Rudbeck." Weemsby spread his hands. "Everything and nothing. You are titular head of the business now that your father is dead, if he is." "Is there any doubt?" "I suppose not, yet you turned up." "Supposing he is dead, what am I? Lita seems to think I own just about everything. What did she mean?" Weemsby smiled. "You know girls, no head for business. The ownership of our enterprises is spread around. Most of it is in our employees. But if your parents are dead, you come into stock in Rudbeck Associates, which in turn has an interest in, sometimes a controlling interest, in other things. I couldn't describe it now. I'll have the legal staff do it. I'm a practical man, too busy making decisions to worry about who owns every share. But that reminds me, you haven't had a chance to spend much money, but you might want to." Weemsby opened a drawer, took out a pad. "There's a megabuck. Let me know if you run short." Thorby thumbed through it. Terran currency did not bother him. $100 to the credit, which he thought of as 5 loaves of bread, a trick the supercargo had taught him. 1,000 credits to the supercredit, 1,000 supercredits to the megabuck. So simple that the people translated other currencies into it for accounting. But each sheet was 10,000 credits, and there were 100 sheets. Did I inherit this? Oh, that's just spending money. Checks, really. You convert them at dispensers in stores or banks. You know how? No. Don't get a thumbprint on the sensitized area until you insert it in the dispenser. Have Lita show you how. If that girl could make money the way she spends it, neither you nor I would have to work. But, Weemsby added, since we do, let's do a little. He took out a folder and spread papers. Although this isn't hard, just sign at the bottom of each, put your thumbprint by it, and I'll call Beth in to notarize. Here, we can open each one on the last page. I'd better hold them, the consarn things curl up. Weemsby held one for Thorby's signature. Thorby hesitated, then instead of signing, reached for the document. Weemsby held on. What's the trouble? If I'm going to sign it, I ought to read it. He was thinking of something grandmother used to be downright boring about. Weemsby shrugged. They are routine matters that Judge Bruder prepared for you. Weemsby placed the document on the others, tied the stack, and closed the folder. These papers tell me to do what I have to do anyway. Somebody has to do the chores. Why do I have to sign? This is a safety measure. I don't understand. Weemsby sighed. The fact is, you don't understand business. No one expects you to. You haven't had any chance to learn. But that's why I have to keep slaving away. Business won't wait. He hesitated. Here's the simplest way to put it. When your mother and father went on a second honeymoon, they had to appoint someone to act while they were gone. I was the natural choice, since I was their business manager, and your grandfather's before that. He died before they went away. So I was stuck with it while they went jaunting. Oh, I'm not complaining. It's not a favor one would refuse a member of the family. Unfortunately, they did not come back, and I was left holding the baby. But now you are back, and we must make sure everything is orderly. First, it is necessary for your parents to be declared legally dead. That must be done before you can inherit. That will take a while. So here I am, your business manager, manager for the whole family, and I don't have anything from you telling me to act. These papers do that. Thorby scratched his cheek. If I haven't inherited yet, why do you need anything from me? Weemsby smiled. I asked that myself. Judge Bruder thinks it is best to tie down all possibilities. Now, since you are of legal age, legal age? Thorby had never heard the term. Among the people, a man was old enough for whatever he could do. Weemsby explained. So, since the day you passed your 18th birthday, you have been of legal age, which simplifies things. It means you don't have to become a ward of a court. We have your parents' authorization, now we add yours, and then it doesn't matter how long it takes the courts to decide that your parents are dead, or to settle their wills. Judge Bruder and I and the others who have to do the work can carry on without interruption. A time gap is avoided, one that might cost the business many megabucks. Now do you understand? I think so. Good, let's get it done. Weemsby started to open the folder. Grandmother always said to read before signing, then think it over. Uncle Jack, I want to read them. You wouldn't understand them. Probably not. Thorby picked up the folder. But I've got to learn. Weemsby reached for the folder. It isn't necessary. Thorby felt a surge of obstinacy. Didn't you say Judge Bruder prepared these for me? Yes. Then I want to take them to my apartment and try to understand them. If I'm Rudbeck of Rudbeck, I ought to know what I'm doing. Weemsby hesitated, then shrugged. Go ahead. You'll find that I'm simply trying to do for you what I've already been doing. But I still ought to understand what I'm doing. Very well. Good night. Thorby read till he fell asleep. The language was baffling, but the papers did seem to be what Uncle Jack said they were. Instructions to John Weemsby to continue the routine business of the complex setup. He fell asleep full of terms like full power of attorney, all manner of business, receive and pay monies, revocable only by mutual consent, waiver of personal appearance, full faith and credence, and voting in proxy in all stockholding and or directorial meetings, special or annual. As he dozed off, it occurred to him that he had not asked to see the authorizations given by his parents. Sometime during the night, he seemed to hear grandmother's impatient voice. Then think it over. If you don't understand it and the laws under which it will be executed, then don't sign it, no matter how much profit may appear to be in store. Too lazy and too eager can ruin a trader. He stirred restlessly. Chapter 18. Hardly anyone came down for breakfast at Rudbeck, but breakfast in bed was not in Thorby's training. He ate alone in the garden, luxuriating in hot mountain sunshine and lush tropical flowers while enjoying the snowy wonderland around him. Snow fascinated him. He had never dreamed that anything could be so beautiful. But the following morning, Weemsby came into the garden only moments after Thorby sat down. A chair was placed under Weemsby. A servant quickly laid a place. He said, "Just coffee. Good morning, Thor." "Good morning, Uncle Jack." "Well, did you get your studying done?" "Sir? Oh, yes. That is, I fell asleep reading." Weemsby smiled. "Lawyerese is soporific. Did you satisfy yourself that I had told you correctly what they contained?" I think so." "Good." Weemsby put down his coffee and said to a servant, "Hand me a house phone. Thor, you irritated me last night." "I'm sorry, sir, but I realize you were right. You should read what you sign. I wish I had time to. I have to accept the word of my staff in routine matters, or I would never have time for policy, and I assumed that you would do the same with me. But caution is commendable." He spoke into the phone. "Carter, fetch those papers from Rudbeck's apartment, the garden." Thorby wondered if Carter would find the stuff. There was a safe in his study, but he had not learned to use it, so he had hidden the papers behind books. He started to mention it, but Uncle Jack was talking. "Here is something you will want to see, an inventory of real property you own, or will own when the wills are settled. These holdings are unconnected with the business." Thorby looked through it with amazement. Did he really own an island named Pitcairn at 15 something south and 130 west, whatever that meant, a dome house on Mars, a shooting lodge in Yukon. Where was Yukon and why shoot there? You ought to be in free space to risk shooting. And what were all these other things? He looked for one item. Uncle Jack, how about Rudbeck? Eh? You're sitting in it. Yes, but do I own it? Lita said I did. Well, yes, but it's entailed. That means your great-great-grandfather decided it should never be sold, so that there would always be a Rudbeck at Rudbeck. Oh. I thought you might enjoy looking over your properties. I've ordered a car set aside for you. Is that one we hopped here in satisfactory? What? Goodness, yes, Thorby blinked. Good. It was your mother's, and I've been too sentimental to dispose of it. But it has had all the latest improvements added. You might persuade Lita to hop with you. She is familiar with most of that list. Take some young friends along and make a picnic of it, as long as you like. We can find a congenial chaperone. Thorby put the list down. I probably will, Uncle Jack, presently, but I ought to get to work. Eh? How long does it take to learn to be a lawyer here? Weemsby's face cleared. I see. Lawyers' quaint notions of language can shock a man. It takes 4 or 5 years. It does? The thing for you is 2 or 3 years at Harvard or some other good school of business. I need that? Definitely. You know more about it than I do. I should by now, but couldn't I learn something about the business before I go to school? I haven't any idea what it is. Plenty of time, but I want to learn now. Weemsby started to cloud, then smiled and shrugged. Thor, you have your mother's stubbornness. All right, I'll order a suite for you at the main office in Rudbeck City and staff it with people to help you. But I warn you, it won't be fun. Nobody owns a business. The business owns him. You're a slave to it. Well, I ought to try. Commendable spirit. The phone by Weemsby's cup blinked. He picked it up, frowned, said, Hold on. He turned to Thorby. That idiot can't find those papers. I meant to tell you, I hid them. I didn't want to leave them out. I see. Where are they? I'll have to dig them out. Weemsby said in the phone, Forget it. He tossed the phone to a servant and said to Thorby, Then fetch them if you don't mind. Thorby did mind. So far he had had 4 bites. It annoyed him to be told to run an errand while eating. Besides, was he Rudbeck of Rudbeck or still messenger for the weapons officer? I'll be going up after breakfast. Uncle Jack looked vexed, but he answered, I beg your pardon. If you can't tear yourself away, would you please tell me where to find them? I have a hard day ahead, and I would like to dispose of this triviality and go to work, if you don't mind. Thorby wiped his mouth. I would rather not, he said slowly. Sign them now. What? You told me you'd satisfied yourself. No, sir. I told you I had read them, but I don't understand them. Uncle Jack, where are the papers that my parents signed? Eh? Weems looked at him sharply. Why? I want to see them. Weemsby considered. They must be in the vault at Rudbeck City. All right, I'll go there. Weemsby suddenly stood up. If you will excuse me, I'll go to work, he snapped. Young man, someday you will realize what I have done for you. In the meantime, since you choose to be uncooperative, I still must get on with my duties. He left abruptly. Thorby felt hurt. He didn't want to be uncooperative, but if they had waited for years, why couldn't they wait a little longer and give him a chance? He recovered the papers, then phoned Lita. She answered with vision switched off. Thor, dear, what are you doing up in the middle of the night? He explained that he wanted to go to the family's business offices. I thought maybe you could direct me. You said Daddy said to? He's going to assign me an office. I won't just direct you, I'll take you, but give a girl a chance to get a face on and swallow orange juice. And we will give Lita plenty of time to get her face on and swallow orange juice, and meet with her and Thorby next time.